that on Thursday, 29 July, the Finance Minister presented his mid-year review of the 2021 budget to Parliament. Now, this is something that he is required to do, in satisfaction of the Constitution. He has to do it every year. Now, normally, we expect that the minister will go to Parliament and say, my revenue and or expenditure, or what they call appropriation, estimates have changed. Because he presented the budget, 2021 budget in November last year. So after 6 months, you expect that things have changed in the economy. They must have affected his revenue and expenditure estimates. So you expect him to go to Parliament and say, my revenue and expenditure estimates have changed, and that this will require that maybe I introduce new taxes or raise old ones, or maybe I need to go up on my expenditure. If he went to Parliament to do that, to ask for more taxes or higher expenditure than the Parliament approved last year, then you will need parliamentary approval for what he's asking for. However, this time around, the minister said he was not asking for additional expenditure or appropriation. He said he was not proposing any new tax changes. Because of that, the budget review did not require parliamentary approval. I think this is, we should try to all understand that. Because people have been asking, but why doesn't Parliament approve it? Parliament is not required to approve because he's not asking for more taxes and he's not asking for more money to spend. The only thing Parliament can do really is to comment on the budget. He's not seeking approval for anything. In fact, so the presentation, the minister's presentation was essentially a rehash of the 2021 budget because not much has changed according to him. In fact, if you look at the aggregate level of revenue and expenditure he presented, it's about the same. But to me, this is a bit puzzling because after 6 months, as I said, and with all these changes in the economy, COVID, whatever, you would have expected that the estimates he made 6 months ago, would have changed. And he has every opportunity to come and amend them, make changes to them. But he chose not to do that. Of course, the expenditure, there's an expenditure constraint on him. That is what has been approved by Parliament, what they call the appropriation. So in the next 6 months that the minister is going to implement the budget, if he gets more revenue but stays within the approved expenditure, he wouldn't have breached anything, especially appropriation. But in the end, he'll end up with a lower budget deficit, and then he will also borrow less. That's what will happen. Now, if on the other hand he gets less revenue, still spends within the approved expenditure, he wouldn't have breached the parliamentary appropriation. But he will end up with a higher deficit, and you have to borrow more to finance it. Now, that borrowing, the additional borrowing, if it is part of it, is the part that is external borrowing, that's the only part that you have to take it to Parliament for approval. Hey, I hope you people are taking notes. By the way, let me remind you that because of COVID, I'm allergic to a lot of things. So we won't have any interviews after the presentation. Yeah, let me remind you because I'm allergic to. but even this month I'm allergic to it. So, but the staff will give you the entire presentation. It's not a very long presentation, so they'll give you copies of the entire presentation. Now, the review, as I said, does not contain macroeconomic and budget estimate. Well, that's also one thing that we noted, that the review didn't provide the medium-term estimates as were contained in the budget itself. So it just made presentations for 2021. So we all assume that those medium-term estimates that were in the 2021 budget still hold. That's the assumption that we can make. Now, I have selected to comment on these areas: economic growth, revenue performance, revenue allocation, the budget deficit, the debt, public debt, employment policy, and economic transformation policy. Well, this is because of the importance that we attach to these issues, But as I said, these are is very subjective. It's based on what we regard as important. They may not be important to somebody else. So let's start with economic growth. Now, if you go back to the 2021 budget itself, which was presented in November, the minister estimated that growth for 2020, that's last year, will be 0.9%. Now, during this review, he said, now he has the exact figure. So he said it turned out to be 0.4%. So 0.9 to 0.4. Now, this seems to suggest that the effect of the COVID pandemic was probably severer than he originally anticipated, the effect on the economy. That's why the growth rate has dropped to 0.4. But this 0.4% growth rate is low, but if you compare it across countries, it is not too bad. A lot of countries saw their economies contract in 2020. In the major economies, small economies. So Ghana, we did plus 0.4%. That's not too bad if you compare to other countries. Now, the budget review, as I said, doesn't contain medium-term projections, as were contained in the 2021 budget. The minister maintained GDP growth of 5% projected for 2021. So, from 0.4% in 2020, and he says this year, he projects that the economy will grow at 5%. And then, as I said, we are taking the medium-term estimates presented last year as, holding. And we note that for the period 2021 to 2024, on average, if you look at the medium-term profile, on average, Ghana is to grow at about 5% annually during the medium term. Now, we have said before that this rate of growth, the average of 5%, is not enough. It's not high enough, because as a country, we have abundant, untapped natural and human resources and excess capacities, which could be leveraged so that we can grow faster and deliver our people out of poverty more quickly. So the point I'm making is that the 5% annual average growth rate that the minister is projecting between 2021 and 2024, Ghana could grow faster than that. If you use that growth rate to compute where our maybe per capita income will be, if we should grow at that rate in maybe 10 years' time, it will be nothing to write home about. So I my thinking is that if we can grow faster, if we will exploit our resources and capacities and leverage them, we can use that to grow faster than the minister is projecting. Now, in terms of revenue, that is something that everybody is familiar with. Ghana, has a serious challenge in mobilizing revenue, and then this has been there for a long time. But the question we always ask ourselves is this challenge, the fact that we are not always raising enough revenue, is it a challenge that is not surmountable? It looks like our policy makers are locked into this kind of mindset that that is all the revenue we can raise. But I think that if we did things differently, we could raise higher levels of revenue. And those of you who have attended my press conferences, sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself. Yes. I've said it again and again and again, and I've submitted memos to the Ministry of Finance based on these views. But they come out with the budget and it's still the same. I don't know. To be honest, if you ask me what is going on, I don't know. Because if we continue to do the same things, we cannot achieve different results. Now, the tax revenue and total revenue projections for 2021 in the review are, so tax revenue 56 billion Ghana cedis, and total revenue. The total revenue, of course, includes non-tax grants and so on. That's 72 billion. So in terms of taxes, we are collecting 56 billion. That's his estimate. Now, I converted it to dollars, and it came to 9.7 billion. That's the total tax that the minister says we will collect for this country, the country called Ghana, 9.7 billion dollars. That is Bill Gates' pocket money. So, so, and the total revenue is total, including non-tax, grants, everything. 72 billion Ghana cedis, 12.4 billion US dollars. This is all the money we have available to spend and do all these things, big things. Of course, the difference is that we'll have to borrow to supplement that in order to finance all the expenditures. Now, if you convert these to GDP terms, the tax revenue in terms of GDP is 12.7%. So it means that as a country we collect only 12.7% of our income, total income in taxes. And then the total revenue is also 16.5% of GDP. Now if you look at our comparators, the middle income countries that we compare ourselves with, they are doing, for taxes, tax revenue, they collect on average 25% of their GDP in taxes. We collect 12.7, half of this. And then total revenue, we are doing 30%, and we are collecting 16.5%. So you see the gap. Our comparators are collecting 25%. We are collecting 12%. What is preventing us from moving up, at least bridging the gap a bit? What is holding us down? It is not because our personal income, corporate income, and indirect tax rates are low in this country. They are not. If you compare with other countries, the income, the taxes we pay from our income, the taxes that companies pay, the indirect taxes that we pay on consumption goods and goods and services. Those rates, if you compare across countries, Ghanaians are relatively high. So the fact that we collect less, taxes as the ratio of GDP is not because our tax rates are low. our low revenue effort is not due to the fact that our tax rates are low. It is rather due to the fact that we fail to collect a lot of taxes. That should be collected. We just, no, we are not interested in collecting those taxes. Please, these are the questions that, as journalists, as I want you to raise them. Put them at the front pages. Legally. IEA says Ghana is collecting half in taxes, half what the middle income countries collect. It is not because our tax rates are low. It is because we don't want to collect more taxes. Well, even the minister reported that during the first half year so far, revenue collection fell short of the target by 4.1 billion cedis, or 12.5%. So you see, even the small revenue that the taxes that we have projected that we will collect, we are falling short. We are not able to collect it. Of course, you can say COVID and all that, So, no, we need to increase our revenue effort, and we should do so by widening the tax net and plugging the numerous loopholes. In fact, the 2021 budget admitted that tax underreporting and tax evasion abound in especially the extractive sector, among others. So the minister has identified that there's substantial amount of tax underreporting and tax evasion. He's admitted that. So let us remind ourselves about some of these loopholes that need to be addressed as a matter of urgency. And we will say that, but then, okay, that's our work. We will put it out. So we expect that somebody maybe probably one day will see the and act on it. Now we lose revenue in excess of 5 billion Ghana cedis through what they call tax exemptions. 5 billion, we lose it. We give it away, tax exemptions. When parliamentarians import a car, they don't pay tax on it. We give tax exemptions to NGOs, diplomatic missions, private people, well-connected people, and we lose 5 billion Ghana cedis. Why don't we want to do anything about it? Because of interest, political interest. When I do it, it will hurt somebody, some big man, some big politician, some parliamentarian. So we don't want to do anything about it. This government drafted a bill, and to streamline these exemptions and place it before Parliament in 2019. It's still pending. We haven't heard that they are doing anything about it. They are not interested. Now, property taxes. Look at all these mansions, sprawling mansions in the urban centers, the city's urban centers. How much property rates and property taxes do we collect? Why don't we do an inventory? It shouldn't be too difficult to do of these, mansions, houses, and so and put market rates, property rates on them. We can make that the responsibility of the district assemblies. And then as an incentive, we'll say that when you collect it, maybe give 10% as part of your internally generated funds. That will be an incentive for them to go out there and collect it. I have a property at Ofanko. Nobody has come to collect the property tax from me for 10 years. Maybe you would say, why don't you also go and pay? Of course, I you must, as a civil responsibility, maybe you should also go and ask them. But how many people will do that? Now we lose revenue, a lot of revenue through what we call illicit financial flows. These are, they take various forms. Trade misinvoicing. Somebody imports things into the country and he undervalues, the imports. Instead of $100 million, you say I brought in the value is 50. So tax me on the 50. That kind of transfer pricing. The companies do that a lot. To transfer monies outside to their parent companies. They use all kinds of tricks. And money laundering and others. It's been estimated that people have done this, our international development partners and so on. Some people have done studies which show that we lose about $3 to $4 billion through these illicit financial flows. Tax evasion and non-compliance abounds. The minister himself admits to that. What are we doing about it? Then the informal sector, is big. Of course, the activities there are small activities, but if you put them all together, Ghana's fiscal services, the informal sector accounts for 30% of our GDP. So almost a third. And if you don't tax that sector at all, it means you are losing, 30% of your GDP is not taxed. Now, we are not asking them to go and tax the kayayos and kinky wachi sellers, ice water. those are not the people. But those who are doing small businesses, the hairdressers and the mechanics and so on, who at least employ a few people and then make some income. Of course, digitization will help in formalizing the informal sector, and maybe they can bring in some revenue from there. Tax fraud and corruption abounds in this country, and is perpetrated by the tax officials themselves. They connive with the taxpayer and pocket the money for their personal use. And then, of course, all the inefficiencies in tax administration, collection delays, you don't cover inadequate taxpayer coverage, high collection costs, they all cost money. So, I've listed these things because the point being made here is that, in fact, people have estimated that if we were to plug all these loopholes, you can add another 10% of our GDP to the taxes we collect. We collect 12%, 12.7 as you heard. So we can even add 10% to it. And that will take us to at least 20. The middle income average is 25. But if we were collecting 20, we will say that, at least we are close enough to it. This thing, I've said it when I'm going to publish it, but nothing will be done about it. Because we've been saying it forever. Now, when it comes to revenue allocation and the expenditure, there too we see a lot of inefficiencies and inflated costs. In fact, in 2021, the total expenditure is estimated at 114 billion Ghana cedis, which is equivalent to 19.7 billion US dollars. So that will be our total expenditure for 2021. Just a little under 20 billion US dollars. Your expenditure is what is normally called, when they talk about your budget. What is your budget? It's really your expenditure. So it means that as a country, our total budget or our expenditure is under 20 billion dollars. This is what is going to satisfy everything. Now, this is not a lot of money. Now, we have argued that Ghana's level of expenditure in and of itself is not excessive. You see, the problem with this country is that it is not that we spend too much. Because as I've said, all that we spend is 20 billion US dollars. The United States, the state of California, a state, their budget is about 500 billion US dollars. A state in the US. We are a country, and our budget is 20 billion dollars. So it's not that. That's why we can't meet a lot of things. That's why you see dilapidated infrastructure and poor sanitation and open drains, and because we don't have enough money. Okay, but of course, if you don't collect enough money, taxes, you won't have enough money to spend because your budget deficit, you must manage it. Okay. In fact, in 2021, the expenditure over GDP is 25%. Now, the middle-income countries, their expenditure over their GDP is 35% on average. So, again, let me make this sometimes people get confused that maybe we are spending too much. We are spending too much. Well, I'll go on to say that I have a problem with the way we allocate the expenditure. But in terms of the levels, Ghana's expenditure is not too big. It's not. But even what we spend, we don't allocate it also properly. That's also another level of the problem. Okay? Our expenditure all these years has been heavily skewed in favor of what we call recurrent expenditure. Some people loosely want to call it consumption. But consumption doesn't mean just eating it from mouth. But it's recurrent. And then we spend very little on capital expenditure, in other words, investment. Because that is where government has a lot of discretion. Okay? Government can decide that, oh, my expenditure is going up because I'm paying more salaries and things, so let me not do this road. That's what they normally do. And so we keep squeezing the capital expenditure, we keep squeezing it, and then we keep inflating the recurrent expenditure, paying big salaries and allowances. And that is growing bigger and bigger and bigger, especially as we enlarge the public sector number of regions from 10 to 16, that will entail more expenditure. They will tell you Article 71 office holders, somebody will decide your salary and increase it and by a large margin, and then they will say, oh, we have to get back pay. So the recurrent expenditure, out of the 25% total, recurrent takes 20 and capital takes 5. So as a country, all our expenditure, it goes to, we are consuming it and not investing. How do you expect this economy to grow? Of course, if you are young like you people, you have a very long-term horizon. Okay? So maybe you can wait for the economy to grow, at 5%. Okay? So maybe in 40 years time, we will get somewhere. Now, recurrent expenditure is dominated by what they call compensation and interest. Now, you understand, compensation is the salaries and allowances paid to public sector people. And this covers all of them, from the presidency down to MDAs, to ministers, all of them, to civil servants. Now, in 2021, compensation is 31.5 billion Ghana cedis. It's all going to compensation. And this is 28% of the total expenditure is going to compensation. And then interest on the debt that we have accumulated is taking 32.5 billion Ghana cedis, or 29% of the total expenditure. The interest that we are paying on our debt alone is taking almost 33 billion Ghana cedis. Our debt is to service it. So when people talk about our debt burden, and I'll get there, whether we are in a debt crisis or not, these are some of the figures that we should be pointing to. Because if we are, as a country, we are using 33 billion cedis of our, out of the total, well, that's the expenditure on to pay interest alone on our debt. That's a serious problem. Now, in terms of the tax revenue, compensation accounts for 58%. And then interest 56%. In other words, we use 58% of our tax revenue to pay salaries. So when we collect taxes, 58%, more than half of it, is used to pay salaries. And then another 56% is used to pay interest. So if you do the calculation, 58 plus